through roots, and he's just having a hell of a time. I said, "You need an auger." And he's like, "I know, I need something." So he called the Four Corners or whatever, and I said, "I have it in my house." So I had Josh bring it over, and he was like, "Wow," because it just rips out everything.
You probably have an auger on your tractor.
I got a 3-point auger, right?
Right.
Oh, really? Right
down
by
the
you.
street.
I didn't think about that. You're right there. But it worked just fine. So we held both sides of it and augered that thing out. It looks really good, though. I'm just not a super big fan of palm trees.
I'm gonna get his son is gonna run my tractor disking his orchard.
Oh, good.
So let him, he said he knows how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give him a shot at that. I told Willie, I said, now, I'm gonna have Cody run this. Is that, he said, oh yeah, he can run it fine. I said, I'm gonna have him do it in your orchard, so if
Right.
it's any trees.
Right. Things go wrong. Well, good evening, sir.
How are you this time, Phil?
Beat the buzzer now.
Hey, get your tie.
I did. Supporting our local talent.
Are we ready?
Sir.
Okay, the regular meeting of the Clear Lake City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency. Meeting of June, what are we, the 3rd? 4th, 2020. Come to order at 6:01 p.m. To begin, Madam Clerk, well, let's read the instructions first. As you know, we're all viewing tonight's City Council meeting. I did call the meeting to order. As a reminder, we're not on a Zoom meeting tonight. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
No, we're not.
Okay. We are currently live screening the meeting on Lake County PEG TV. However, on YouTube channel, you can submit your comments on items on the agenda through our town hall portal found on the city's website. Okay, to begin, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Purdock?
Here.
Councilmember Harris?
Here.
Councilmember Overton? Here. Vice Mayor Sluten?
Here.
Mayor Kramer?
Here. Okay, everyone's present. Those, all of us, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Harris, would you please lead us?
Gladly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
With liberty and justice for all.
If you'll remain standing for the invocation, Mr. Art Carson, would you please lead the invocation?
Thank you again.
Tonight, Lord, we give thanks knowing we are blessed to live in a nation, a state, and a community where we are able to come together to meet and where an individual's voice on matters is not only allowed, but encouraged. So, as Paul wrote in his letter to the Colossians, for this reason we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will and all wisdom and spiritual understanding, that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might according to his glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. And Lord God, by way of your love and grace through faith, we ask that you endow this council leadership with the courage, strength, and wisdom required to guide our community into a bright, secure, and fruitful future. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And please be seated. Thank you, Mr. Carson.
Thank you.
Okay. As you all know, while we're operating under these new meeting guidelines, they're not so new anymore, I'll explain our meeting procedures. Agenda items will be open for public comment before final action is taken. Citizens wishing to comment on any agenda item should email the city clerk or submit their comment through the town hall portal. Comments received will be read aloud by either myself or a staff member during the agenda item. If the public comment is received on an item not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the City Council, that comment will be read by either myself or the staff member during public comment for up to 3 minutes. Because we're operating in a virtual setting, I'll call on my colleagues one at a time to speak. After council deliberation, I'll call for a roll call vote by the city clerk. We don't have any remote participants tonight, do we?
No.
So I won't worry about that part of it. All right, we'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Mr. City Manager, are there any modifications to the agenda?
No modifications.
Can any council members have any changes?
None.
No.
Seeing none, I'll take a motion to accept the agenda.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Harris and seconded by Councilmember Overton. All in favor, roll call vote, please. Don't need it? Pardon me? Don't need?
Voice vote is fine.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes. Agenda is accepted. And we'll now move on to presentations. Our first presentation will be a proclamation declaring June 2020 as LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And I'll read this proclamation. Since there's no one here to accept it, I'll just read it here from the dais. Whereas our nation was founded on the principle of equal rights, LGBTQ plus Pride Month, June 2020. Whereas our nation was founded on the principle of equal rights for all people, but the fulfillment of this promise has been long in coming for many Americans. Some of the most inspiring moments in our history have arisen from the various civil rights movements that have brought one group after another from the margins to the mainstream of American society. And whereas in the movement toward equal rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBTQ plus people, a historic turning point occurred on June 28, 1969 in New York City with the onset of the Stonewall riots. During these riots, LGBTQ plus citizens rose up and resisted police harassment that arose out of discriminatory criminal laws that have since been declared unconstitutional. In the 4 decades since, civil rights for LGBTQ plus people have grown substantially, and LGBTQ plus pride celebrations have taken place around the country every June to commemorate the beginning of the Stonewall riots. And whereas California has been a leader in advancing the civil rights of its LGBTQ plus citizens, and while further progress is needed, it is important to recognize and celebrate the substantial gains that have been achieved. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Clear Lake does hereby proclaim June 2020 as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in Clear Lake and calls upon its citizens to eliminate prejudice everywhere it exists and celebrate the diversity of our community. Dated this 4th day of June 2020 and signed by myself as mayor. Thank you. And we will pass this on to someone at a later date. All right. Next presentation will be by Chief White on code enforcement statistics. Chief White.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. Tonight I'm here to give you a brief overview of some of our statistics within code enforcement and what we've been up to. So the first thing I want to talk about is our vacant commercial building ordinance. You remember that was a new ordinance for the city designed to target some of the most blighted commercial areas and encourage a couple of things. First of all is to bring them up to a baseline maintenance standard, and second of all to encourage them to be leased out, rehabilitated, or torn down. Did have a little bit of a slow start to it because of some staffing, and then obviously we had the start of COVID during this, so it hasn't been moving as quickly as we would like, but we have opened 20 cases. Out of those 20 cases, we've seen 2 buildings demolished, 4 buildings are now occupied and leased out, 6 are currently registered, 1's currently in progress, 7 have been cited, and the others are pending. So it's been really exciting to see some of the ones come through. For example, one that hadn't been insured because nobody had been inside of it, they now have a tenant in there and it's actually insured. And seeing ones even torn down is a really good thing because they were dilapidated and needed to go. So we continue to work on that area, but that's the progress thus far. With case activity, we've opened 2,086 cases this year. There's currently 583 that are open. Those include new cases that were open this year, this fiscal year that is, as well as some that have been open from the last fiscal year. They've issued out 1,479 administrative citations. They average about 519 cases per officer throughout the year. Just looking at some areas, so we divide the city into 3 areas based upon the CDBG areas and the basically political subdivisions of the city. We call those areas 1, 2, and 3, with 1 being the avenues, 2 being kind of the central corridor of the city, and 3 extending up into the Clear Lake Park area. So looking, sorry, my slides are out of order. Looking at cases, we see that there's roughly an even distribution, with the area 2 having a slightly higher amount than areas 1 and 3. So just to go back to the map, areas 1 and 3, 1 being the avenues and 3 being up in the park. So 2's a little bit busier, but there's also more concentration there, so not too unusual. Case activity, just looking at the breakdown, we have closed out 124 marijuana cases, so the cultivation. There are 23 that are waiting. We have 398 closed property cases this fiscal year. We're currently waiting on 194. We have 302 vehicle cases that have been closed out. There's 15 currently waiting. There's 738 closed vegetation cases, 337 that are currently open and waiting for follow-up activity. In the area of vehicle abatement, we've had 285 total vehicle abatements. 194 vehicles have been towed. 91 have been voluntarily moved or were gone on arrival when the officer went back. This is an area that we really tried to expand in. As you recall, the AVA funding, the loss of that for a period of time significantly impacted things. Your council this current fiscal year provided us significantly more money to go out and abate additional vehicles, and by the numbers, we've been able to do that. Really, our limitation here isn't a staffing one. It's simply a cost. You'll notice at our storage yard, we build them up to about 100 cars or so and then take them off. But unfortunately, that is an area that's truly driven by the available money to destroy the vehicles and crush them. So looking at case dispositions, just to kind of give you a sense of how things lay out, we've had 799 cases that have been abated, or that includes ones where we've gone out and done stuff, or the property owners ultimately complied and abated the issue. We've had 263 that are counted as corrected. There's some of these disposition codes really depend upon the type of case that it is. There's been 154 cases that have had citations. So what we see oftentimes are violators who don't comply. There's repeat citations that go on there. That's why the numbers don't quite match up with the number of case dispositions. There's been 127 cases with a towing disposition. Again, some of those had multiple vehicles towed. That's why you see a higher number in the prior report or prior slide. 75 cases that were unfounded and 7 that were referred to some other outside agency. Looking at abatements, one thing that we tried this year that was different is our Cal Recycle money ran out. So we looked at some other opportunities to correct properties that we weren't able to get compliance through the owner or their ghost property, tax defaulted, et cetera. And we did that with all in-house staff and using some equipment from Public Works. To give you a sense, a contracted abatement for a property that's shown up on the screen would be about $11,500. We were able to do it in-house for about $2,500. That includes the personnel time, benefits, et cetera, as well as the dump fees. This is what that same property looked like afterwards. So again, trying to tackle some of these properties that otherwise would have sat and be able to go out there and remove them. That was about 13 hours of abatement work times for code enforcement officer personnel. So it does take some significant effort for some of these properties, but I think the results are well worth it. Another thing that we did, and I talked about this, I believe, when we did the annual report, but I wanted to bring it back to you based upon our discussion at the last council meeting direction, was to talk about the compliance process. So historically, to kind of walk you through a typical code enforcement case, we would get a complaint or an officer would on-view it. That complaint would be assigned out and would be investigated within roughly about 3 to 10 days is our target. If at that time they discovered that there was in fact a violation, they would issue what was called a public nuisance citation, not to be confused with an actual citation where you pay money. It's just citing what things they're in violation of. They'd give them another 14 to 30 days to take action. That time they would come back. If the violations were still there, they would then issue them a notice of violation, citing the exact same stuff that was on the public nuisance citation. 30 days after that, they would go back and post an administrative citation, which 10 days later would start accruing fines, and it would accrue fines up to a certain point for, I believe, a period of roughly 30 days. After that, if there was funding available, they would then look at abatement. So you're talking about 30 days later. To give you a sense from a violation that's occurred until some sort of actual action is being taken penalty-wise, it was roughly 54 to 70 days before we would see action. I look back at a lot of the cases when I came here, there's complaints primarily around vegetation enforcement. And the way it would work with timing is that a lot of times there wasn't any punitive action until we were well into fire season. And those cases would just sit and keep going. So we went back and revamped the process and kind of looked at the best practices with code enforcement. We still keep the 3 to 10 days as our target for investigating complaints. We go out there, if there's a violation, we issue what's called a notice of violation. That gives the property owner an opportunity to correct. With those, the default now is 14 days, which is what you see standard throughout incorporated cities. They give them that notice. If within that 14-day period, one of two things can happen. They can either correct the violation, or if it's a property owner that's responsible, but they might need some more time to take care of the stuff, they contact us and we'll generally issue an extension. If they take no action after the 14-day period or whatever period was extended, then we issue administrative penalties. As you may recall, we revamped the administrative citation ordinance, and with that, we don't post and accrue fines daily. We issue separate citations, but we actually issue less fines per violation, but we're much more effective at collecting and pursuing those, with the goal being to get compliance. After that point in time, we then can go to abatement, again, if we have funding available to abate the problem. If there's no funding available to abate the problem, then we have to think about other outside options, and sometimes that option is a property will sit until we have some sort of abatement ability. The key changes in this is that we reduce the timeline down significantly to the soonest would be roughly 14 days. There are some exceptions though. For example, some of the illegal cannabis cultivation where there's violations, there were some changes made in state law where we can issue immediate citations, as well as other egregious violations or properties where we've been out to multiple times over the years and they don't comply. So rather than give them windows of time to just let violations get exacerbated, we issue a citation immediately. So the new compliance process has allowed us to reduce that time for compliance, but also to providing an allowance for extensions. So the idea of being kind of sharpening the pencil and really going after a more precision approach for those people who don't want to cooperate, don't want to follow the city laws. Again, we talked about the multiple administrative citations, so we can do up to daily, but instead of just letting one accrue and then being done, we have the opportunity, if they continue violating throughout the year, we can take additional action. We now use a third-party processor to collect the fines. This prevents us from having to come make special assessments, wait for that to get on the tax rolls. As we know, the county doesn't do tax sales with any frequency. So it helped us to eliminate that step. The other part that's really important with that is that some of these administrative citations, instead of going with the property, well, in fact, all of these, the penalty actually goes to who the property owner is. So if the property does actually sell, then it will stay with that owner, not necessarily the property. So it avoids situations where we haven't actually expended abatement money, in which case we would want to have it attached to the property, and allows us to focus it to who's actually responsible. So we've seen some cases where people have actually bought properties that were extremely blighted. They came in, they cleaned them all up, and we left the citations with the prior owner who didn't take care of things, and the new person has a clean slate. If it was assessed, that wouldn't be the case. They would have to pay it all off when they get the property. We also streamline the appeal process. So people who want to appeal a citation, they can actually do it online. They can come into the lobby. They can send a notice through the mail. It's a two-step appeal process. We do the initial review in-house, which gives us an opportunity to try to figure out, for example, some people, if we're able to work with them on the fine, they can then pay to get stuff abated. So we try to work in that manner. And then also to set up payment plans and other things that we weren't really able to do in an organized fashion before. If they go to a formal appeal, then that goes to the city manager and he hears those. As I mentioned earlier, again, we also added additional responsible parties. So sometimes we go to properties and we can identify who the actual person is that's committing the violation that may be different from the property owner. For example, if somebody comes over and sets up their camper on your property, and we've told them they can't do that and so forth, we can actually go after them, whereas before it was always the property owner 100% of the time. So again, trying to take a more focused and precision approach. Our efforts haven't been without their challenges. It goes without saying the ghost and the tax defaulted properties continue to be a problem. It's an area that I think we need to continue to work on and put pressure. I was looking in ads just the other day and saw another county's proceeding with a tax sale right now. So it's perfectly capable of being done, but it does cause a problem for us. And really what it comes down to is it's just more money for the city and the taxpayers, because some of these properties we ultimately end up having to go in and abate, cut down weeds, et cetera, because of the fact that they haven't been sold. The abatement cost continues to be an issue, so vehicles and property are obviously expensive to abate. Some of them, we can do some limited things in-house, but a lot of the properties require contractors, et cetera, heavy equipment to do the abatement. And then more recently, we've been impacted by some court closures. Fortunately, we're now getting inspection warrants again, which is critical for primarily in the illegal cannabis operations, but also too in some other properties where we can't get onto them. But we are still limited in our abilities to go after receivership cases and so forth. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Member Purduck, do you have a question?
No questions, but thank you, Chief. That was a very good report.
Member Harris?
I just want to commend you on stepping up the timeline for compliance. Obviously, that's something that's going to be hugely beneficial to us, and that effort by itself may actually prevent fires or prevent homes from burning or save lives. So very much appreciated. It looks to me that the in-house abatement seems to be a very affordable scenario compared to the other scenarios. Is that something we can continue to do?
It's very limited, primarily because most of our code enforcement is CDBG funded. So we'd have to identify some sort of non-CDBG funding to allow them to do that. The other part is it's that balancing act between them doing cases and them out doing that work.
Right.
We tried to take advantage of, like during the winter time when things had kind of slowed down, they took care of some of these lingering properties. But it's certainly something that we want to continue to look at.
Now, if memory serves, the primary reason that we increased our franchise fee on universal disposal was for the purpose of having an additional funding source for projects just like that, for garbage removal and that sort of thing. I don't remember exactly how much the additional franchise fee was generating for the city, but I know it was fairly substantial. And if we looked at it from the perspective of $2,500 a property, even if we were to average $4,000 a property, I think we could do a lot of properties in-house with that funding. So I just think that would be a consideration for that funding source. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Overton.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any work programs? I mean, that used to be years ago that we would have, like, people that were in jail that were, that we can use, or there are other work programs such as the workforce through the social services, which we've also had them work for the city. Is there any way to be able to use them? I know not right now, but, in the future that we can maybe work with one of those, some of those programs like that and use them to do some of this work?
There's some possibility for it. We have reached out to the sheriff's office, and with changes with realignment and everything else, this is all pre-COVID, their available work pool is significantly diminished. But it's something that I think we should look at, and if people have ideas of other programs or whatnot. I know some cities have some nonprofits that have stepped in because workers' comp and those things kind of jump in, but there are other options that I think I'd be open to.
NCO for nonprofits has insurance. That's what we use for ours down at the community center there. Also is maybe using AmeriCorps, because they're always looking for projects. So maybe if we have, that might just be somebody you might want to meet with and talk to and see, in the future of we have a property, what they might be able to help out, because that's their whole thing, is coming into the communities and helping. So just some ideas, but I think it's great. Thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Slotin?
Thank you, Chief White, for this presentation. It's sometimes, we get calls as council members of properties that are, people direct us to. But when I see the total amount of things that, it shows that we're doing a bunch of stuff out here. And it's good to see that most of them are become in compliance, so that's a good thing. I think this makes the city a cleaner and safer city. Thanks for a good job. Appreciate it.
So I'd echo those comments you are doing. There's obviously doing a lot of code enforcement cases, a stunning number, actually. I have a question. You mentioned the courts. Can you get into the courts now? Are they open?
There's limited operations for things. There's some things that they're doing. They're in the phase of reopening stuff. Just from the scope of code enforcement, it's my understanding that receiverships still aren't going in some of the civil cases, but we are able to get the inspection warrants now.
Okay. Well, hopefully things can be filed pretty soon, too. Vegetation. Now, I know you had one group where you picked an area and sent out notices, but do you also have officer observations that result in pre-citations or the process beginning for vegetation?
Sure. So primarily, most of our caseload is actually officer-driven across the categories. So in the vegetation, they've selected areas, but it's pretty well distributed across the city. I mean, they've made some priority ones, particularly along like 53 and the avenues and looking at the high fire threat zones. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the cases are officer-driven.
Okay, and of course, then we have out in the numbered streets. That's a whole different challenge, apparently. So, again, thank you very much. You continue to do a great job in that, and we look forward for better things going forward. Any do-overs? Any other opportunities? Last chance. Okay, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make one comment that it is extremely unusual to have code enforcement officers that are actually willing to go do actual abatement work. And so I think it's a big thank you to that division to being creative and hardworking and doing everything they can with limited resources.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I've seen a number of them out there on a backhoe or out there picking up garbage themselves, cleaning up some of those lots we were talking about out in the streets. So, moving on. Public comments. Public comments will be accepted via email through the city's town hall portal prior to the start of the meeting. Each public comment emailed to the city clerk will be read aloud by the mayor or a member staff for up to 3 minutes, or will be displayed on the screen. Public comment, emails, and town hall submissions which are received after the beginning of the meeting will not be included in the record. Madam Clerk, do you have any public comment? You do? Okay.
I have one registered statement through our online town hall portal from Mr. Terry Stewart, who states, I have been pleased to see a few blighted properties have been recently abated. However, there are still many that are disgracing our neighborhoods that need abatement. Many of those are partially burned structures that were vacant for long periods before they went up in flames, usually due to the fact that squatters move in. The city needs to the city needs to find funding to abate said nuisance properties, even though the underlying property may not be attractive enough to sell at a later date to recoup the abatement cost. As residents, we cannot be expected to live next to burned, trashed, and garbage-strewn properties forever with no action from the city. There are partially burned structures within 100 feet of City Hall that burned and were red tagged over 40 months ago with no further action. And that concludes Mr. Stewart's statement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the council or audience requests otherwise, or if staff has requested a change under adoption of the agenda, in which case the item will be removed for separate consideration. Any item so moved will be taken up following the motion to approve the consent agenda. Are there any items, Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Overton? Vice Mayor Slotin? Does the public have any?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Seeing none, I will accept a motion to approve the consent items.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as submitted.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Purdock and seconded by Vice Mayor Slotin. Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call?
A roll call is not needed since the council is all present. You can do a
Oh, okay. I kind of like that, though. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. And motion passes. Okay. Move on to our business items. First business item, number 7, consideration of the adoption of resolution number 2020-25, calling for and giving notice of the general municipal election. Mr. Flora.
City Clerk Swanson will provide the staff report on this item.
All right.
Honorable Mayor and council members, as I'm sure your council is aware, there is a general municipal election scheduled for November of this year. Council members Harris, Overton, and Purdock's seat will be on the ballot. The candidate filing period begins July 13th and ends August 7th unless one or more of the incumbents do not file for re-election, in which case the filing period is extended to August 12th, excuse me. The year has brought unexpected changes in the paradigm of public service and how we conduct the people's business. The election process is the foundation of our democracy, and our commitment to that process is unwavering. In preparation for the upcoming candidate filing season, the Secretary of State has published a guidance memo for all election officials in regard to COVID-19 safety precautions. Over the next month, staff will develop information for candidates and filing procedures based on that guidance and work in cooperation with the Lake County Registrar of Voters to provide the most accessible and safe candidate filing process. The first step in preparing for the November election is adopting a resolution calling for the election and authorizing the consolidation with the statewide election. The resolution will then be considered by the Board of Supervisors for approval, and the County Elections Office will partner with the city to conduct the election and prepare the official canvass. Based on prior elections, the estimated cost will be approximately $10,000 to $15,000 budgeted in the next fiscal year. That's my report. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Overton, let's start with you. Do you have any questions?
I do. When it comes to the signatures that are required, have they mentioned, if, let's say this, it goes and comes back or whatever, are they have a plan for that?
There is no plan that's been developed just yet. We're expecting guidelines to come out any time. And I'm sure that we'll work with the candidates to make sure that that's a safe process.
Councilmember Harris?
The only thing I would add is that I would like to see it so that any candidates that are filing to run for the election to be allowed to participate here in the back row, spread out, of course, for their safety. But I'd like to actually allow them in here so that they can bear witness firsthand to the procedures and become more familiarized with the process and where we are on subjects.
I'm certain that we can work something out to have them present once we're allowed to open to the public, and they can always view right now on.
Right. I just thought I don't know how long this is going to continue like this, but it would be sure nice to have them be able to,
I'm certain we can work something.
We want to hit the ground running for whoever
Right.
gets elected.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment related to that?
Sure, Mr. Flora, go ahead.
I was going to mention this in my report, but right now we're kind of planning on the first meeting in July, trying to accommodate at least some members of the public back in City Hall. It sounds like, unless things change dramatically, there's going to be some direction from the governor on trying to encourage this opening back up again a little bit. So,
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flora. Councilmember Purdock.
No, sir.
Vice Mayor Slotin.
I have no comments on this.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your comments on this.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Yes.
make one additional comment just related to this? I just wanted to share that I was at the courthouse yesterday and I had a short conversation with the registrar of voters, and they're still working on the details, as Ms. Swanson mentioned, and waiting for some additional direction from the Secretary of State. But it sounds like that there will probably be perhaps not all the in-person precinct voting places, but there will be some, and so they've requested us being flexible, at least here at City Hall, and providing an opportunity for people to vote. And so I assured her that we would do whatever we could to make sure that it was available. So I just wanted to pass that along.
Both by mail and by
As I
walk-in.
understand, they're going to try to focus it more as a mail election, but there will be accommodations for in-person voting.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any public comments?
There were no public comments received on this item.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Again, any comments or deliberation?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2020-25, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Clear Lake calling for and providing for and giving notice of general municipal election to be held in the City of Clear Lake, County of Lake, State of California, on the 3rd day of November 2020 for the purpose of electing 3 City Council members, each to hold a term of 4 years or until their successor are elected and qualified, and requesting approval of the Lake County Board of Supervisors for election services to be provided by the County Election Department.
I'll second.
Motion has been made by Vice Mayor Slotin and seconded by Councilmember Overton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Okay, moving on to business item number 8. Celebration of a consideration of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Clear Lake and the Clear Lake Miscellaneous Employees Association for the period July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Mr. Flora?
I don't know if anyone would consider it a celebration exactly, but.
Yeah, I corrected that.
So, as the council is aware, we have had some negotiations with our miscellaneous employees association and have a tentative agreement on a new memorandum of understanding that expires at the end of, the existing one expires at the end of this month. And so, based on the significant concern that we have remaining over the impact of COVID-19 on our local revenues, we recommend only a one-year agreement at this time. So very few changes included in this agreement. One of the key ones, I guess, is the one-year agreement with the 3% cost of living adjustment. We've talked about this a number of times before, but over the past I guess year or so with our other association agreements, we have adjusted. We found that there was a lot of inconsistency with salary ranges. Over the years, things weren't cleaned up very well, and so this agreement would make some minor adjustments so that the salary ranges of all the employees within this unit would be consistent with the salary ranges of our other units. So there's some minor language clarification related to uniform and equipment allowances, which you can see in the red line version of the agreement. And then just similar to the salary ranges, there's various outdated language that over the years may have been in there for 10 years or so and was never cleaned up and is no longer relevant. And so we address those issues. But other than that, the agreement remains relatively the same. One other key point is the association wants to have a discussion about possible incentive or adjustments related to those maintenance workers with Class A licenses. And so there is a provision in this agreement that we agree to meet and confer with the association at some point during the term of this agreement and try to come to some resolution on that item. So unless there's any questions, that's my report on this.
Councilmember Purdock, do you have any questions?
No.
Councilmember Harris?
None.
Councilmember Overton?
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Everything that's line through is no longer existing in here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Because there's a whole lot of line through, so the percentage that the city was paying, the public employees retirement system contribution. So
What page are you on?
that's on page 3 at the bottom.
Yeah, so we eliminated some of the old language and added new language that's consistent. So this language was put into place when the PEPRA was coming into effect, and there was some salary offsets done because some existing employees had to begin paying. I'm sure it's been a while, so you may not be as familiar with it, but it was common practice for the city to pay a portion of the employee's share of their retirement costs. And with the PEPRA law, that's no longer allowed to happen. And so in cases where that did happen, employee salaries were adjusted up an equal amount so that they didn't actually take a pay reduction. But moving forward, there's no way to do that. It doesn't impact anyone anymore. And so we just removed all that old language and put new language in that's consistent with what's happening today.
So anything to do with the PERS program has just been because of the updates on everything else, and that just was never updated in the memorandum.
Yep.
Okay. Right. And then the salary adjustments, I see that on page 4, 3.1.2, 3, and 3.2 all been just taken out, and then this is the new salary ranges?
Yeah, I mean, 3.12 and 3.13 previously had, as you can see, a 2% increase in the first year of the agreement and then a 2% increase in the second year of the agreement. And so, that wasn't needed. This is just a one-year agreement with a 3% increase.
Okay.
Which I should mention is consistent with the other agreements the council has previously approved with our bargaining units for the Police Officers Association and the Middle Management Association for a 3% increase beginning July 1st.
Okay, and I think,
Are you done? Do you have any other comments?
I think that's it.
Okay. Vice Mayor Slotin.
I hope this is all still within our, we'll come into our budget talks, that this is, we'll be able to cover this.
Yeah, of course, we did some calculations to see what we could do, and, so we do have, the budget at this time is the proposed budget for next year is balanced, and we're working on finalizing the document, be releasing it early next week to the council and to the public, and we have been able to include this increase in that budget.
It seems to be a fair, and it's a one-year deal, so it's, we can address it next year depending on what the economy will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. Glad you asked that question. That was on my mind as well, whether this is figured into our new budget or not. It does, so that's good. Good job. Are there any public
No public
comments? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Council members, any additional comments or questions? Staff? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt memorandum of understanding between the City of Clear Lake Municipal Employees Association, and authorize the city manager to sign.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Harris and seconded by Councilmember Purdock. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And that moves us on to city manager and council member reports. Mr. Flora.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a few items. All of you today should have received a PSPS Wildfire Safety Program kind of presentation from PG&E, so if any of you didn't receive that, let me know. We're still waiting on more granular detail on sort of their microgrid program that they're going to be rolling out in some areas of the state, including Lake County and City of Clear Lake, and exactly what areas are going to be impacted with that. So, of course, we'll share that information whenever it becomes available. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be, but I have a pretty good level of confidence that there will at least be some areas of the city that will be set up during this fire season. I'm not sure the timing and all that. I'm not sure that any of it's going to be ready to go like in July, but probably a few months down the road, more towards August or September. But I don't have any great details right now. Just a couple of COVID-related things. You may have seen that the public health officer has allowed inside dining in restaurants starting today. With social distancing. Cases are increasing somewhat. You may have noticed that over the past week or 10 days. However, currently they're not at a level that the public health officer plans to reverse course on continuing to loosen restrictions. So, I would mention that anything that any of you can do to share about encouraging folks to be tested if they have any question. The testing capacity, a lot of work was put into getting testing capacity here and other areas of the state. They're not anywhere meeting their maximum daily capacity at this point. There's a lot of additional room for folks to be tested. So you can get on Public Health's website and access a link to sign up online, or if you have problems with that, you can call Public Health and they'll help you get scheduled. We are continuing conversations with Dr. Pace and Public Health about having a July 4th celebration here in the city. A lot of other celebrations around Lake County have been canceled. Lakeport doesn't intend to do anything. I've heard that Clear Lake Oaks may do something still. But the Lions Club really wants to do it. They've submitted a plan to Dr. Pace. He, I would say, is, fairly concerned about it being a large gathering, but we appreciate his willingness to work with us. We've had several conversations with the Lions and Chief White and myself with him, trying to, kind of figure out a way to make this happen. And so more details to come, but it looks like it will move forward. The fireworks show and some limited food vendors. There won't be any carnival. There won't be a parade. But it'll be kind of more like a drive-in style of fireworks show, I think, for the most part. We are working really hard to try and get the park done so that some areas of that at least can be enjoyed that weekend. So I think there's still a lot of little things to do, but we did a walkthrough today. There's going to be a walkthrough on Monday with the contractor, and the goal is going to be to have that ready to go. So the bathrooms, I don't think will be complete because some of the fixtures are kind of delayed in there, but I think everything else should be in pretty good shape. As you know, we've been doing a lot of budget prep work. I again want to thank, in particular, Ms. Swanson and Chief White for going above and beyond in the absence of City Finance Director to make sure that we have budget on time and structurally balanced. So thanks to both of you for that. And so as I mentioned, I think earlier, we expect to be releasing that document at some point on Monday for your review. So it's going to be a little different this year. We've kind of focused on making sure that the numbers worked rather than the document itself. So it's going to be a little bit more streamlined, but we're fully utilizing the online transparency budget portal that we started using last year. And so it's going to be continually improved, especially when our finance system comes fully online. There'll be a lot of additional information available to the council and the public, but you'll be able to go online once we release this document and kind of drill down and do your own research and kind of live looking at the numbers and looking at different charts and stuff. So I think you'll appreciate that. And then the last thing I was going to mention was focusing on allowing some public back into the council meetings at our first meeting in July, but I already mentioned that earlier. So we'll just set things up so folks can socially distance as much as possible and accommodate as many as we can here in what we have. So that's my report, unless you have any questions.
Count.
You guys mentioned one thing really quick. The animal shelter office trailer was delivered yesterday. It looks really nice, and so it's not all set in place yet, but the project is moving along.
Outstanding. Councilmember Purdock, do you?
I'll let you report out on the LTA.
No, you go ahead. I
So I would like to report out, though, Mr. Mayor, on the Clear Lake Chamber. We had a meeting, and I'd like to also thank the new chamber manager that is new to the position, but she's been very active in trying to help navigate through this COVID-19 issue and be supportive of businesses. She was, again, helped to facilitate placement of people with the Highland Senior Center if they wanted to make meal deliveries or maybe work in the kitchen if they'd been laid off in our local restaurants. She also has been collecting and trying to distribute masks to businesses at either a free or reduced cost. And so if any of the businesses out there are having any struggles or issues, or you have questions and the chamber can assist you, please contact Chelsea at the chamber office. Our hours have been reduced, but they are posted on the chamber website. So if anybody needs that assistance, the chamber's there to help you. And that concludes my report.
Councilmember
Harris. Nothing of significance other than we did see the basketball courts at the youth center resealed. So that has taken place, and now we're going to be restriping them so that they look formidable for the use for basketball there. And that's a really common place for people to use for the basketball courts. And then I did stop in and visit with the peaceful protests that were taking place in our city Chief White was in attendance. I just want to say how much I appreciate the peaceful aspect of the protests that have been ongoing in our community, and I hope that it maintains that peaceful aspect, and then also appreciate the police department for monitoring, the way these things can transpire, making sure everything's safe, and being there to actually work with the people that are protesting. I would say that I really strongly, I feel very, very strongly about having the 4th of July celebration. I think that it's rare that 4th of July falls on a Saturday, and this is a wonderful opportunity for us with all the work we've put into the park, and I think that we could clearly administrate something that's very simple and social distancing related, and masks required possibly in the park, but I'd really like to see this take place. So extremely supportive of that concept, and I have been in talks with the Lions Club as well, and they're all behind the idea of getting this thing going, and I am as well. So I'd really like to see some realm of normalcy as we get into July. That is all.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Overton.
I agree with that, with Councilmember Harris. I'm curious, we're saying that we're not looking for a parade, but to me, the parade is pretty much the safest one to do, because we can make sure they're distanced on the roadways, and, the floats are, maybe just have them not occupied. Most of those people that are on their floats are already occupying around each other, so I would like to at least have something, I don't care if it's a fire trucks or something, but not to have anything would be, I think we have to start realizing that, there's going to be a something normal here that's going to change for us, and we're going to have to deal with it. And I think we have enough time to figure out something for the 4th of July. Whether it's people can make their floats and maybe just set them out here where they can still be judged and still be a participant in our community. People like to do those things, and they're going to do something anyway. So I say we need to look at this. I do appreciate that Gary Pace has kept us safe. I do appreciate that he's taken the steps to open us up slow, and I like that he's waiting, a week or two before he does anything else. I think that's a smart move on his part, and I appreciate that we have somebody at that level that has been directing us very good. So I do want to make sure that he's recognized for that. I was out at Animal Control yesterday. It is looking awesome, so I'm excited, and I think Public Works would be more excited when it gets in so that they have some space. I want to thank all our volunteers in our community. I don't think we thank them enough. I don't think they've probably even really been thanked, but we have a lot of people that have volunteered. I mean, I have been blessed at the Senior Center to have people step up and do something that, people, that I had doing it were older, so, they didn't really want to get out there and get sick, and a lot of people stepped up to help keep serving our Meals on Wheels, and they're still there, and I'm thankful for that. I think that it would be nice to recognize some volunteers when we can open up some. So I have been able to get a grant that was for dog food for our community. It is coming in tomorrow, so we will try to distribute it out to different areas of the county. We're hoping that, I hope that it doesn't all have to be used for fires, but we want to be prepared for the fires, because we know that that's one of the concerns when we had the fires, that we didn't have enough food for the animals and stuff. So I want to be able to keep part of this back, but then also part of it to go out to our community, to our animal control, help save some money there, to other organizations that, have the, foster the animals and stuff. So that will be coming in tomorrow. So if there's anybody that has any storage, we're looking for some storage. So, and I think that's it. Thank you very much, everybody that's been through this whole thing. You guys have done a great job.
You have any response to the parade
Well,
or anything else?
well, I would just say that, we'll try to support anything the Lions want to do. I think from the discussions that we had, they didn't want to just do the fireworks, because part of some of these other activities are fundraisers for them, and they don't want to be in a position where they can't afford fireworks next year. The carnival, for I think some obvious reasons, was taken off the table pretty early. But my understanding is they thought that they would just focus on, it's going to be some extra work to put these things together, and focusing on that. accommodating the fireworks show, which is kind of the most important piece, and then having some food vendors and stuff to help generate some revenue. But I mean, if they want to, you know, figure out a way to do it, we'll help them make it happen, I think. But, you know, I want to say that to tag on to your comment, I think it would have been very easy for Dr. Pace just to say, I don't really think this is a good idea, don't do it, because he doesn't really think it's a good idea. But to his credit, he understands that we really think that we need to do something. There should be some way to celebrate. There's likely to be some unsanctioned celebrations if we don't have something like this that could be even more dangerous. And so, you know, he's willing to put his time in and work with us to make sure that we reduce the risk as much as possible. So the point I haven't had a chance to follow up with Councilmember Overton yet, but I did make contact with the county. They think they likely have some space for us. I'm supposed to know more in the morning, so I'll connect with you when I hear back from them.
Thank you, Mr. Flora. Vice Mayor Slotin?
I don't have a whole lot to report because I haven't been to any meetings, but I did talk to the protesters here. And I want to applaud the chief and the police department of being very smart and bringing a cooler with Gatorade to it.
Could you check your mic? I'm not sure your mic.
Thanks, Chief White, for being proactive and delivering that cooler with Gatorade to the protesters. I wanted to digress a little bit because this Black Lives Matter is kind of important to me. I've been in riots. I was in the Paris riots in 1970 where I was shoved against the wall and frisked and everything taken out of my pockets until they finally realized I was a Dutch citizen and they let me go. So I know both sides of this issue. And I also know that racism does exist. I have a smart, blonde daughter that went through the Davis School District. And the difference between the treatments he got and to my two dark Guatemalan boys is amazing. You don't believe it. There is racism. There still is, even in a city like Davis. So I want to just tell you that this is an issue that we need to, even at a local level, we have to be aware of and try to remedy it as much as we can. So, thanks. And also, I think the chief and the people from the NCAACP are talking constantly, so that's a good thing. And thank you for doing that, too. That's my report.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. Those are sensitivity and awareness of racism and is definitely something that we all need to continue to work on and improve. There is no room for that. And Chief White, watching you out there with your mask on and visiting with the protesters, I thought was a real class act. It was a great act, and I think it probably kept things even calmer. So I applaud that. I went to, as Council Member Purdock handed off to me, APC LTA meeting earlier this week. We discussed budgets, as with pretty much it seems like all of our meetings are around those at this time. We talked about updates on the projects, and a couple of them in Lakeport. The calming project on the North Shore along Highway 20 is going through a planning and design stage now, as is the 11th Street project in Lakeport. Didn't really talk too much about the Highway 53 corridor project. It hasn't gotten quite that far in the design work, but it is in process. And I think, Mr. Flora, you're involved in that, on that committee too, as I recall, from the reports I get. The Highway 53 corridor.
Well, I was early on. I haven't been involved in any.
I don't think they've done anything lately. That was
doing some of the background work now.
yeah. So anyway, we appreciate having local representation on that. Lake Links, we did make an offer for our CEO mobility manager position, and that offer was accepted. We're now in negotiations with the individual to how much of her moving expenses we're going to pick up. So that's in process. She's apparently made an offer on a home already here, which indicates to me that she intends to stay, and I obviously appreciated seeing that. The volunteers recognition, I think, is important. Definitely like to see that happen later this summer as we get things back to normal. Because there's been a lot of folks that have given a lot of their time through the COVID-19 and before, so we do need to recognize those folks. And last, I had a nice long conversation this afternoon with former Mayor Nick Bennett. He's doing well in North Dakota, sends his regards to all of you. Seems to be enjoying North Dakota a lot more than he said he was enjoying California. They aren't sheltering in place quite to the extent that we are, apparently, and things are open. His health seems to be holding from what he says. His COPD is holding. He's not on oxygen. He's feeling pretty good. So all's good with him. He sends his regards to everyone. And that's my report. So, unless there's anything else, we'll go on to future agenda items. Councilmember Purdock, Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, it's been brought up by a couple of council members here about our volunteers, and I can't agree more that the volunteers in our community are an enormous asset to our community, and volunteers in all different capacities in our community. I would like to see us have a volunteer appreciation day, or we could have it either as a luncheon or something specifically denoted for the purpose of congratulating and applauding our volunteers in our community.
You'd like to have that added as an agenda item?
Yes.
Okay.
Approval of such.
I couldn't agree more. Councilmember Overton, nothing more? Vice Mayor Slotin? Anything for the...
I like the idea of volunteer, maybe we have a volunteer of the year or something, or volunteer of the month kind of thing, as a regular agenda item in presentations. So that might be one way.
We have had formal volunteer, give them a recognition certificate come up before.
And I talked to earlier today with Alan on the rental inspection ordinance, and another one is fee structure, development fee structure. Those are things I'd like to see sooner than later.
For the rental?
Yeah.
Okay.
You should see both of them relatively soon.
You weren't surprised by those, huh? Okay. We will now move to closed session, conference with legal counsel on the existing litigation, and conference with our real estate negotiator, property negotiator.
2-minute break.
After a 5-minute break.